All right, let's get right into it. We're going to tackle a question that probably crosses your mind all the time. Where does money actually come from? And more importantly, why does it feel like it's worth a little bit less every single day? Let's dive in.
I mean, really think about it. The price of your coffee, your groceries, a tank of gas, it just keeps creeping up, right? It feels like the money in your wallet is shrinking. When you're not imagining things, it's a very real phenomenon. And the short answer comes down to one single word.
Inflation. You've heard the word a million times, but at its core, it's a pretty simple idea. You've got too much money floating around in the system, all chasing after the same limited amount of stuff to buy. When that happens, prices have no choice but to go up. But, that simple definition, it hides a much, much more interesting story.
To really get a handle on inflation, we first have to peek behind the curtain and look at the money creation machine itself. We have to see where it all begins.
So, this whole story really has three main characters. First, you've got the central bank. Think of them as the conductor of the whole financial orchestra. Then there are the commercial banks, the ones we all use every day. And finally, there are the depositors. And yep, that's you. That's us. We're the ones who hold and use the money.
Now, the central bank's command center, so to speak, is its balance sheet. On one side, it holds assets, like government bonds. But for our story today, the other side, the liabilities, is what's absolutely crucial. That includes the physical cash in our pockets, and importantly, the digital reserves that commercial banks hold at the central bank.
And together, that cash and those reserves make up something called the monetary base. Some economists even call it high-powered money. And why is it high-powered? Because this is the foundational layer of money that the central bank has almost total control over. And any little change it makes here gets magnified and ripples through the entire economy.
Okay, so we know what this high-powered money is, but how is it actually, created? Let's zoom in on the exact moment that new money is born. This is where the real magic happens.
The central bank's #1 tool for creating money is something called an open market operation. I know, it sounds super complicated and technical, but the concept is actually surprisingly simple. It's really just the act of buying or selling government bonds or securities on the open market.
So, let's set the stage. Here is a simplified look at the balance sheets for both the commercial banking system and the central bank. Think of this as the before picture. Now, watch closely. What happens when the central bank decides it wants to buy, say, $100 million worth of securities from a commercial bank?
And boom, just like that, the commercial bank sells its securities. And in exchange, the central bank just credits the bank's reserve account with $100 million. That money wasn't moved from somewhere else. It was literally created out of thin air. In that very instant, the monetary base just grew by $100 million.
So, here's the bottom line, the most important takeaway from this part. An open market purchase is a direct injection of new, high-powered money into the financial system. It's a predictable, powerful lever that the central bank can pull anytime it wants to expand the money supply. Okay, so we know how the money gets created, but so what? How does that connect to the price of a gallon of milk? Well, it turns out there's a surprisingly elegant formula that helps explain, well, just about everything. This little beauty is the equation of exchange, but most people know it as the quantity theory of money. It might look a little intimidating, but it's an incredibly powerful lens for understanding the whole economy. Let's break down each piece of the puzzle. First up is M. That's the money supply. Simple enough, right? It's the total amount of money circulating in the economy. And we just saw how the central bank has a huge influence on this number through its control of the monetary base. Next, we've got V, which stands for the velocity of money. Just think of this as the speed at which money zips around the economy. How many times does a single dollar get spent and change hands in a year? That's its velocity.
And on the other side of the equal sign, you have P times Y. P is the overall price level in the economy, and Y is the real economic output, all the actual stuff, the goods and services we produce. Put them together, and you get the total dollar value of everything sold, also known as nominal GDP. Now, this brings up a really critical idea in economics called the classical dichotomy. It's just a fancy way of saying we can split the economy into two categories: real things, like the number of cars built, and nominal things, which are just the dollar price tags we put on those cars.
And this leads us to another huge concept, the neutrality of money. What this means is that in the long run, just printing more dollar bills doesn't magically create more cars or make our factories more productive. All it does is change the nominal prices. You can't just print your way to real prosperity.
Okay, all the pieces are now on the board. We know how money is born, and we have the equation that links that money to the wider economy. So now, let's connect the dots and finally solve the mystery we started with.
That big quantity theory of money equation can be rearranged to give us this incredibly clear and simple formula for inflation. It basically says that the inflation rate, that's the Greek letter pi, is simply the growth rate of the money supply minus the growth rate of the real economy.
Let me say that again, because this is the absolute key to everything. If the amount of money in the system is growing faster than our ability to produce actual goods and services, then prices have to rise to make up the difference. We are right back where we started. Too much money chasing too few goods.
So that begs the question, why on earth would a government let the money supply grow too fast? Well, when a government needs to pay its bills, it generally has three choices. It can tax its citizens, it can borrow money by issuing bonds, or it can create new money.
And when a government chooses that third option, paying its bills by creating money, it results in something called the inflation tax. See, by increasing the money supply, they cause inflation, and that inflation quietly eats away at the value of every single dollar you've saved. It's a tax that nobody ever votes on, but everyone who holds cash ends up paying.
Which brings us to our final and most important question. We've seen the direct line connecting the central bank's actions to the value of the money in our own pockets. So, if creating money effectively acts as a hidden tax on all of us, why is it still such a common and tempting tool for governments all over the world? That's something to think about.